For centuries, we have been told a lie about genius. We have been taught that it is a lightning strike from the heavens, a divine gift bestowed upon a chosen few at birth. We look at the great minds of history and we see a different species operating on a level of intellect we can never hope to reach. This belief is the most comfortable and the most destructive lie in the world because it gives us the perfect excuse to never try. But what if genius is not a gift? What if it is a habit? What if the minds of the great innovators are not running on different hardware, but are simply running a different, more powerful, and entirely learnable software? Welcome to the Architect's Vault. Today, we are not celebrating genius, we are deconstructing it. We will install a new operating system on your mind by decoding the 7 fundamental brain habits of a true genius. These are the core algorithms that allow them to see what others don't, to connect what others can't, and to build what others won't.
Hunt the question, not the answer. The human brain is the most magnificent answer-finding machine in the known universe. From our earliest moments, we are trained and rewarded for this singular skill. In the classroom, the student who knows the answer is called smart. In the boardroom, the executive who has the answer is called decisive. Our entire society is a grand and glorious temple built to worship the power of the correct answer. And this is the very first prison that the genius mind must learn to escape. The amateur, the expert, the 99% spend their entire lives in a frantic and noble hunt for answers. Their mind is a library, and their goal is to fill it with as many books of established knowledge as possible. When faced with a problem, they rush to this library, pull a book from the shelf, and present a well-researched, historically validated answer. This is a valuable skill. It is the skill of a scholar, but it is not the skill of a genius. The genius mind has been retrained. It has been rewired to bypass the library of answers and go to a much deeper, stranger, and more powerful place. It is not an answer finder, it is a question hunter. The genius understands a truth that is so fundamental, it is almost always overlooked. The size of your answer is and always will be predetermined by the size of your question. A small, safe question will always produce a small, safe answer. An incremental question will produce an incremental improvement. The amateur asks, how do we make the internal combustion engine 5% more efficient? This is a good question. The answer is a slightly better car. The genius asks a different, more dangerous question. They look at the same car and ask, why do we need an engine at all? This question is an act of intellectual demolition. It does not seek to improve the existing answer, it seeks to annihilate it and to create an entirely new universe of possibilities in its place. The first question leads you down a well-trodden path. The second question forces you to stare into the terrifying, beautiful, and empty field where a new path can be forged. The genius, therefore, does not see a problem and rush to a solution. They see a problem and they fall in love with its central question. They stalk it, they surround it, they put it under a microscope. They spend 90% of their mental energy not on solving the problem, but on finding the single, perfect, and most profound question at its core. Is the problem that rockets are expensive? Or is the question, why do rockets have to be thrown away? Is the problem that traffic is bad, or is the question, why do we need to own cars at all? The habit then is this: to develop an almost allergic reaction to easy answers and to cultivate a deep, obsessive, and joyful curiosity for the questions that hide beneath them. It is the discipline to stay in the state of not knowing longer than anyone else. The amateur is defined by the answers they know. The genius is defined by the questions they are brave enough to ask. Build bridges between worlds. The expert mind is a deep and powerful well. It drills down deeper and deeper into a single, narrow subject, achieving a level of mastery that is formidable and profound. This is the path of the specialist, the scholar, the master craftsman. But the genius mind is not a well, it is a web. The genius understands that the deepest insights are rarely found at the bottom of a single hole. They are found in the empty, unexplored spaces between the holes. Their great habit is not to dig deeper, but to build bridges. This is the art of connecting the seemingly unconnected. It is the practice of building bridges between disparate worlds of knowledge, and in doing so, creating a new world that is far greater than the sum of its parts. Consider the 15th century. The world of knowledge was locked away, painstakingly copied by hand by scribes. Information moved at the speed of a single human hand. In the city of Mainz, a man named Johannes Gutenberg was obsessed with this problem. He was a goldsmith, a master of metals and precise inscription. He was an expert in his world. If he had been only an expert, he would have tried to invent a slightly faster way to write, a slightly better pen. He would have stayed in his own well. But one day, Gutenberg was observing a wine press. This was a completely different world, the world of agriculture, of crushing grapes with immense distributed pressure. To the average person, there is no connection whatsoever between the delicate art of a goldsmith and the brute force of a wine press. They are two separate, isolated islands of knowledge. But the genius sees the bridge. In Gutenberg's mind, these two worlds collided with the force of a supernova. He saw the underlying mechanism of each. The goldsmith's coin punch could create a perfect, repeatable letter. The wine press could apply a massive, even force over a large area. In that moment, a new world was born. What if you took the repeatable letter from the world of metalworking and applied the distributed pressure from the world of agriculture? The result of that collision was the printing press. It was an invention that belonged to neither world, but which changed both of them and all others forever. This is the habit. The genius is an intellectual pollinator, a mental traveler. They do not live on a single island of expertise. They build a fleet of ships, and they sail between them, carrying the pollen of an idea from one to the other. Steve Jobs was not the world's greatest engineer, but he had studied the art of calligraphy. He built a bridge between the world of elegant typography and the world of the personal computer, and in doing so, gave us beautiful digital fonts. The architect does not just study architecture, they study biology to understand how a termite mound ventilates itself. The musician does not just study music, they study mathematics to understand the hidden patterns of harmony. The habit, then, is to cultivate a ravenous and almost indiscriminate curiosity. It is to read the books that have nothing to do with your field. It is to learn about the industries that have no connection to your own. You are not just filling your mind with facts, you are stocking your arsenal with foreign weapons. Because the next great breakthrough, your next impossible solution, will not be a discovery, it will be a connection. It will be the bridge you build between your question and a world of answers that no one else ever thought to look at.
The ruthless distillation is a type of mental subtraction. It is the ability to take a complex problem and boil it down to its essence. It is the art of finding the one simple law that governs the chaos. This habit is not about being simplistic. It is about achieving a profound, almost divine simplicity on the far side of complexity. It is the result of a brutal and often painful process of elimination. The genius takes a problem and attacks it with a single, sharp question. What is the one thing that truly matters here? The process is ruthless because it requires you to kill your darlings. It requires you to cut away the beautiful but unnecessary features, the interesting but irrelevant facts, the clever but distracting arguments.
It is a war against the non-essential. The habit, then, is to train your mind to become a furnace. You must learn to take in the vast, messy ore of a problem and burn away everything that is not the core truth. You ask yourself, if I could only communicate one thing, what would it be? If I could only solve one part of this problem, which part would make the biggest impact? You distill and you distill until you are left with something so simple, so potent, and so true that it cannot be ignored. The amateur is known by the complexity they can navigate. The genius is known by the simplicity they can create. The former is a skill. The latter is a superpower.
The latticework of models. The human mind is a tool-using machine. To solve a problem, we reach for a tool. The great tragedy of modern education and specialization is that it equips the vast majority of people with only one single powerful tool. The economist is given the hammer of incentives, and so to them, every problem in the world, from love to war, looks like a nail of incentives. The biologist is given the hammer of evolution, and so every problem becomes a nail of natural selection. The engineer has the hammer of systems, and the psychologist has the hammer of trauma. These are all magnificent hammers. To be an expert, to have a powerful hammer, is a great and valuable thing. But as the great thinker Charlie Munger observed, to the man with only one hammer, every problem looks like a nail. This is the curse of the expert, the intellectual straitjacket that prevents them from ever achieving true genius. They are a god within their own tiny kingdom, but a fool in the wider world. The genius mind rejects this prison of specialization. They understand that the world is not organized by academic department. A problem in business is never just a business problem. It is also a problem of psychology, of mathematics, of history. To see it through only one lens is to be willfully blind. Therefore, the genius cultivates the habit of becoming an intellectual thief. They deliberately and systematically steal the single most powerful, fundamental concept from every major discipline, and they build in their mind a toolkit of these mental models. This is the habit of building the latticework of models. Imagine a simple wooden latticework, the kind you might use to grow a vine in a garden. The structure itself is simple, but it allows the vine to grow in a strong, complex, and interconnected way. A mind without this structure is just a pile of disconnected facts. A mind with this latticework has a framework for wisdom. The genius encounters a problem, and they do not reach for a single hammer. They hold the problem up to their latticework. They look at it through the lens of physics, and they ask, what is the point of maximum leverage here? What is the critical mass needed for this idea to take off? They look at it through the lens of biology, and they ask, is this system more like a fragile thoroughbred horse or a resilient cockroach? Is it subject to the laws of natural selection? They look at it through the lens of psychology, and they ask, what are the cognitive biases at play here? How is the incentive-caused bias warping everyone's perception of this problem? They look at it through the lens of mathematics, and they apply the principle of inversion, asking not how can we achieve success, but what are all the things we must avoid to prevent failure? Each mental model is a different tool, a different lens that reveals a different layer of the truth. By combining them, the genius is able to see the problem in 3 or even 4 dimensions, while the expert is forever trapped on a flat 2-dimensional plane. The habit, then, is not to learn more facts within your field. It is to steal the single biggest, most powerful idea from every other field. Steal compound interest from finance, steal natural selection from biology, steal critical mass from physics, steal cognitive dissonance from psychology. Build this latticework in your mind, and you will find that you have an almost supernatural ability to see the true multifaceted nature of reality. The amateur collects facts. The genius collects models.
The joy of being wrong. There is a single emotion that is responsible for more stagnation, more ignorance, and more catastrophic failure in the world than any other. It is the cold, sharp, and deeply personal sting of being proven wrong. For the vast majority of humanity, this feeling is a form of intellectual death. Our ego, the internal guardian of our self-worth, is inextricably linked to our correctness. From the school classroom to the corporate boardroom, we are rewarded for having the right answer. Being right feels like a victory. Being wrong feels like a public execution. And so we build a fortress around our existing beliefs. We surround ourselves with people who agree with us. We consume the media that confirms our biases. We engage in furious intellectual combat to defend our positions, not because we are certain they are true, but because we are terrified of the alternative. Our beliefs cease to be hypotheses about the world. They become a part of our very identity. And to have one of them proven false is to have a piece of ourself amputated. The genius mind understands that this is the great prison of the ego. It is a fortress that does not keep enemies out, but which locks the prisoner in, preventing any new light from ever reaching them. Therefore, the genius cultivates a habit so strange, so unnatural, that it looks to the outside world like a form of madness. They learn to find a profound and genuine pleasure in discovering that they were wrong. This is the habit of the joy of being wrong. The genius understands a simple mathematical truth. The moment you discover a flaw in your own thinking, the moment you are presented with a new piece of evidence that shatters one of your old beliefs, you have not lost the battle. You have just become, in that exact instant, measurably less stupid. To be proven wrong is to receive a precious and often painful gift. It is the gift of a course correction. It is the universe handing you a new, more accurate map of reality. The amateur, whose ego is fragile, sees this gift and smashes it on the ground in a fit of pique. The architect, the alchemist, receives this gift with a sense of exhilaration. Charles Darwin, one of the greatest minds in history, lived by this rule. He famously kept a separate notebook, and his highest priority was to immediately write down any fact, any observation that seemed to contradict his theories. He did this because he knew the human mind's natural tendency is to immediately forget or dismiss evidence that challenges its cherished beliefs. He was actively hunting for his own errors. The habit then is to perform a profound act of psychological surgery. You must carefully, deliberately, and systematically detach your ego from your ideas. Your ideas are not you. They are tools. They are hypotheses. They are temporary lenses for viewing the world. And when a tool is proven flawed, you do not feel shame. You feel a sense of gratitude that you have discovered the flaw before it caused a catastrophic failure. And you feel a sense of excitement because you now have the opportunity to replace it with a better, sharper, and more accurate tool. The genius does not seek the warm, comfortable validation of being right. They seek the sharp, thrilling, and transformative experience of becoming less wrong. One is the path of stagnation. The other is the path of infinite growth.
Create the sacred void. The modern world is engaged in a war against emptiness. From the moment you wake to the moment you sleep, you are immersed in a relentless, crackling storm of input. The smartphone buzzes with notifications. The inbox fills with urgent demands. The endless scroll presents a torrent of new information, new outrages, new distractions. We are taught that productivity is a function of filling every available second with activity. To be busy is to be important. To be still is to be lazy, to be falling behind. The amateur mind accepts this as reality. They become a master of managing the storm. They learn productivity hacks, they optimize their calendars, they multitask with heroic and ultimately futile effort. They are a ship captain, frantically trying to patch 100 leaks in a hurricane, never once questioning why they are sailing into the storm in the first place. The genius mind understands that this storm is the single greatest enemy of true creation. They know that a brilliant insight, a truly original thought, is a quiet, timid creature. It does not shout, it whispers, and it will not and cannot be heard in a hurricane. Therefore, the genius cultivates a habit that looks to the outside world like an act of profound laziness and irresponsibility. They turn the ship and they deliberately sail it away from the storm. This is the habit of creating the sacred void. The sacred void is a block of time fiercely protected and utterly inviolable, where there is no agenda, no goal, and no input. It is a scheduled appointment with nothing.
This is not meditation. It is not relaxation. It is a deliberate act of cognitive deprivation. It is the long, solitary walk with no phone. It is the hours spent sitting in a quiet room with nothing but a blank notebook and a pen and no pressure to write a single word. It is the long, silent drive with no podcast, no music, no audiobooks. To the amateur, this looks like a waste of time. To the alchemist, this is where the entire great work happens. Why? Because the human brain, when deprived of external stimuli, will do something extraordinary. After the initial jitters of withdrawal from the storm of information, the mind begins to feed on itself. It starts to open the dusty, forgotten filing cabinets of the subconscious. It begins to make new, strange, and beautiful connections between old ideas. The bridge between the goldsmith's punch and the wine press was not built in a busy workshop. It was built in the sacred void of a long walk through the Alps. The theory of relativity was not born in a noisy laboratory. It was born while a young patent clerk was daydreaming, staring out a window, a moment of profound and productive laziness. The sacred void is the silent, empty incubator where the seeds of your disparate knowledge, the bridges between worlds, finally have the quiet and the space to cross-pollinate and create something entirely new. This habit is an act of rebellion. It is a declaration of war against the cult of busyness. It requires the courage to be unreachable. It requires the confidence to be unproductive in the short term in order to be wildly creative in the long term. The amateur believes that genius is the result of what you do. The architect knows that it is often the result of what you choose not to do. It is born not in the storm, but in the sacred, beautiful, and profoundly creative silence of the void.
The bias toward action. We have now assembled the core software of the genius mind. We have learned to hunt the great questions, to build bridges between worlds, to distill the complex into the simple. We have built the latticework of models, we have learned to find joy in being wrong, and we have created the sacred void for true creation to occur. And it is at this very moment, with a mind perfectly tuned and an idea polished to a brilliant shine, that the final great enemy appears. It is the most seductive and intelligent of all the demons. It is the demon of more. It whispers, the idea is good, but it's not perfect yet. You need more research. You need one more meeting. You need to read one more book. You are not ready. This is the voice of intellectualism without an outlet. It is the curse of the beautiful blueprint that is never built. It is the sound of a magnificent engine revving to redline, but with the transmission stuck in neutral. It is the eternal, tragic perfectionism that leads to a life of brilliant preparation and zero execution. The genius mind understands that this is the final trap. They know that all the thinking, all the modeling, all the deconstruction is utterly and completely worthless without the final, crude, and courageous act of making the idea real. This is the seventh and final habit. It is the master algorithm that gives all the others their power. It is the bias toward action. The bias toward action is a simple, almost brutish philosophy. A flawed action is infinitely more valuable than a perfect inaction. While the amateur is spending a year designing the perfect, flawless airplane on paper, the genius has already built 10 clumsy, ugly prototypes that have all crashed. To the outside world, the amateur still has a perfect record, and the genius has a record of nothing but failure. But the genius is the one who is light years ahead. Why? Because the real world is the ultimate and only source of true data. Each crash, each failure, each clumsy attempt is a high-bandwidth feedback loop that provides a torrent of invaluable information. The amateur's perfect airplane on paper is a fantasy, a hypothesis based on 1,000 unproven assumptions. The genius's 10th prototype, built from the wreckage of the 9 firsts, is an object forged in the unforgiving fire of reality. This habit is a deep, instinctual understanding that you cannot think your way to the right answer. You must act your way there. The amateur believes the sequence is think, 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 perfect, act. The architect knows the true sequence is think, act, fail, learn, repeat.
The bias is not toward reckless action. The thinking is still paramount, but it is toward action that is just good enough. It is the courage to launch the 80% solution, knowing that the feedback from the real world is the only thing that can get you to 100%. Therefore, the final habit of the genius mind is to cultivate an almost physical discomfort with pure theory. It is to see a great idea not as a treasure to be polished, but as a tool to be used, even if it breaks. The amateur's greatest fear is launching and being proven wrong. The genius's greatest fear is never launching at all and dying with a mind full of perfect, untested, and ultimately useless blueprints. One is the path of the scholar, the other is the path of the architect, the creator, the God.
These are not 7 simple tips. They are the 7 pillars upon which the temple of a genius mind is built. Genius is not a destination you arrive at by birth. It is a path you choose to walk every single day. It is the courageous habit of questioning everything, the discipline to seek clarity, and the humility to embrace your own ignorance. The software is now yours to install. The work begins with your next thought. Thank you for joining us inside Capital Sanctum. To continue upgrading your mental operating system, subscribe to Capital Sanctum and join the architects of the future.